allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I don't say it wrong. As always, we begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land through the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting our land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. With that, I'll go ahead and get us started and have us do the roll call with Sarah, our Deputy Clerk, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Werner?
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Mayor?
Here.
And we'll move on to announcements from the City Manager.
Good evening. I just wanted to make the announcement that our next regular meeting is next Monday, the 17th, and then we will have 2 meetings off, one for spring break and the other for the 5th Monday. So the next regular business meeting after the 17th will be April 7th.
Thank you. And to the Deputy Clerk, please.
Meetings scheduled for this week are the Traverse City Light and Power will meet Tuesday, March 11th at 5:15 in the Chambers. The Complete Streets Ad Hoc Committee will meet Wednesday, March 12th at 10 a.m. in the Committee Room. The Brown Bridge Trust Fund Ad Hoc Committee will meet Wednesday, March 12th at 11:15 in the Committee Room. And the Joint Rec Authority will meet Wednesday, March 12th at 7 p.m. in the Chambers.
Thank you so much for that. So with that, we'll get started on our first topic for discussion tonight, and is a presentation from Frank Deturi on our road salt discussion. And I'll just hand over to Frank, or do you have, yeah, go right ahead, Frank.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last thing you said.
Oh, I said just go right ahead, Frank. Sorry, I wasn't sure if Liz wanted to intro you, but you are well-known and loved here, so we'll just let you take it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate
Why we're sitting in the gloom here?
Oh, that's just so they're...
For when the Zoom comes on?
Is
Okay.
there a reflection for a
Yes.
minute so I
Yeah.
can see what I'm writing?
Fair.
Thank you.
If the reflection on the screen bothers you, I can turn it back off.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Frank, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Thanks for having us have the opportunity to come up and talk about our salt use reduction plans moving forward. This was a suggestion by the City Commission in recent meetings to delve into and explain a little bit more about the process that goes into our abilities or our efforts to keep our roads safe while using salt products. I'm here tonight with my whole team. So we have Chris Weber from a street superintendent. He's sitting behind us here. He's the fellow that's pretty much in charge of the operations. Everything is rolling across the city, and how the supervisor and the crews operate. I also have Christine Black here from Asset Management. That division essentially looks at all the data that drives a lot of the decisions that we like to make. How we measure our salt use, how we measure our truck movements across the entire city, and also have Joel Tapio, the garage superintendent. And Joel's in charge of all the equipment. So this is definitely a big team effort. This is certainly not my presentation. This is our presentation, and it's a team effort. In today's discussion, we're here to talk about how to reduce salt usage while maintaining effective road safety through tested and emerging alternatives. And I'd like to just move through the presentation and then open up for questions after we've gone through it. There's a lot in here, and you're more than welcome to grill us with questions afterwards. But I'd like to try to get through the presentation first. So. In today's discussion, we have an outline here. We're going to talk about future initiatives. I think that's what this body wanted to really hear first was where are we going with this? What have we been, give us a direction. Tell us what we're doing to reduce salt use. So we'll talk about those initiatives right off the bat. And then we'll get into the background. And the background is the things that we've done, the history that led us to the decisions for the processes that we're heading towards. We'll talk about road type classifications. We'll talk about salt reduction initiatives that are in place or plan to be in place. We'll talk about our salt usage, where it goes, and also where the salt is stored within DPS. We'll talk about some municipal comparisons. We chatted with 11 other agencies, municipalities in the last 3 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or so regarding this, and we're actually in contact with them quite often. We'll talk about alternative methods that can be a decision of the city commission to move forward if those alternatives are something that the city commission would like to see, and also next steps. New equipment and technology. So we're looking to implement a hybrid liquid solid system on our new trucks. This new truck is the one that we'll talk about it later in the discussion. These are the trucks that we ordered 2 years ago in 2023. They came in 2020, basically came in 2025. They're a shell of a truck right now. They're waiting to be upgraded by the, upfitted by the commercial entity that adds those pieces to the truck. So we'll get there a little bit later in the presentation. We're also looking at to expand the use of wing plows to clear multiple lanes per truck at one time. That was actually already ordered, so that will come in, and it will go on the upgraded truck as it comes into play for our next season's work. Operator training and application adjustments. We certainly want to look to increase training awarenesses and operators and supervisors. We send our staff volunteers to go to snow fighter conferences and APWA conferences to learn as much as possible about a new and emerging technology. So we'll continue along those roads with substantial effort. Provide more application rate options to encourage lower salt use when possible. We'll talk about that in detail a little bit later also. Brine storage and facility upgrades. Build a state-of-the-art brine making, mixing, storage facility. It's been identified in the CIP for a few years now. This is something we've been looking towards. A few years ago, MDOT had a grant opportunity that allowed you to seek some funds for some of this. The only issue was you could only apply for the amount of funds for the percentage of MDOT roads that you have in your city. We're at 6.7. Those dollars compared to the amount of money that it would cost for us to get our brine system up and running didn't fit into the budget at the time, but we're going to keep looking for opportunities to fund that moving forward. We have upgrades to our existing brine maker, certainly something, we'll talk about that also later. Public education and policy considerations. I think it's all of our duty to increase public education and outreach. The city, through its processes, are certainly not the only folks that are placing salt throughout the city. It's widely used to de-ice and provide safe conditions on sidewalks and people's driveways around their homes, as well as the city on the roads and bridges and on some city sidewalks. Address potential chloride pollution from private property. What I just mentioned, I think those are things that we need to continue to explore. These initiatives we need to continue to inform people. And we have set up a meeting with a watershed center to discuss the best management practices for that. That'll occur later this week, and we'll work with them as much as possible moving forward for some of those best management practices. Public align with the new MS4 regulations requiring public outreach. That's coming too, and I think it's essentially what I just mentioned. So now we'll get into the background and how we got here. I first just like to say an amazing round of thanks to the crews that dedicate their time and energy to doing this work. Our crews are out. It's not an easy job. They're out in the middle of the night. We all realize that folks get paid for their jobs and they choose their jobs, but these folks have an extremely challenging job at times, and they're out in the worst of conditions, and my heartfelt thanks goes out to the entire crew. These are dedicated staff dedicated staff, our local residents, they're outdoor enthusiasts, they're fishermen and fisherwomen. They like to go to the beach. They take great pride in their work, ensuring safe roads while actively protecting the natural environment they call home. There's some stats here that talk about how many miles of motorized routes and non-motorized routes we have. We can come back to any of that if you like. Road type classifications. So the road types that we have around the city, essentially MDOT, our major routes, our locals, and our alleys. And if you look at these two pie charts here, you can see that 31% of our streets get 65.5% of the salt. MDOT and the major routes, which are also considered emergency routes, they're kept at a level of expected service for our police department, for our fire department, for our emergency services folks to get around. I think this says quite a lot that, again, 65.5% of our salt goes on essentially 2/3 of our salt goes on 1/3 of our roads. And here's a little bit of history on how we actually got to where the decisions that we're beginning to make. Back in the 90s, we started to reduce salt loss from bounce and scatter. So when salt comes into the back bin of a truck, there's different versions of how they display it, but typically it's into a spinner and it tosses out on the road. Back in the day, the salt was tossed out onto the road and bounce and scatter. It would bounce along the roadway. Some of it would stay on it, some of it wouldn't. In the 90s, we began incorporating the use of a liquid brine. So as the salt was coming off the back of the truck in the spinner, it was doused with a little bit of brine that helped it adhere to the road surface and helped reduce that amount of salt we were using. So that was one of the first things we had done. And then our standing operating procedure we put into place in 2013. It was the salt sand management plan, SOP, sorry, the salt sand management SOP. That gave the drivers guidance for the level of service on each one of these road types that we just talked about. That was in 2013 was the standard operating procedure. In 2018, we optimized some of the controllers that allowed dispersal of salt from the vehicles. No one's perfect. No machine's perfect. These adjustments are what we tried to do is make adjustments so we could keep them in control. We've all seen piles of salt along the highway in places. If a truck stops suddenly and the spinner's still spinning, you'll see salt deposited there. What we were trying to do was come up with a way so that that while the drivers are doing everything that they're trying to do, remove snow and plow, they also have, we also adjusted our controllers so that we would prevent overuse through putting fail-safes into the Optimer, the controllers, sorry. Full liquid application, so that was 2018. 2019 was our first shot at a full liquid application. It was 23% brine. We did it in-house. We used a manifold that was built by the great staff in the garage. Basically built a pipe manifold with nozzles on it. We tried it on one route. And what we learned from our try at one route was that we're not in the business of making good equipment, that maybe we should look forward to understanding what the best equipment is and purchase that. So that led us to where we're heading. Okay, let's see if we can find some vehicles and equipment that allow us to put down full liquid. So we'll get down there. We'll get to that in a minute. But that full liquid application pilot in 2019, again, told us that we need to look further into it, and we have been since. The Beat Heat implementation in 2020 is, and I know you've heard a lot about this, but I really can't say enough of how happy we are to have been able to find and use this product. It reduced our salt application from 350 pounds per lane mile to 200 pounds per lane mile, while maintaining the same service levels of service. It actually worked better than the same level of service because instead of with typical rock salt, its effective working range is essentially 15 degrees and above. While using Beat Heat, we were seeing good results down to 0 and 10 below in sometimes. Effectively, the result was, even though it is salt, and Beat Heat is more salt, the use of Beat Heat with more salt and the sugar that's in Beat Heat allowed us to put down 42% less salt every time we covered a mile of road, which led to a 35% cost savings per lane mile of road. We also reduced our salt sand mix, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too. The salt sand mix is what's used on in hilly situations where we're trying to get, we want to be really conscious of some sort of friction additives so that we don't have any issues with cars on the hills, basically east and west sides of our town. The expanded pre-wet nozzles. So we already have done this. We expanded our pre-wet nozzles. So we basically manipulated what we had for our pre-wet so we could get more liquid on the salt as it was coming out. But we're also, as it mentions here, there's a potential to further reduce granular salt while increasing the liquid use. And we'll be experimenting with that too. We'll be doing everything we can to find ways to get the least amount of salt on the road for the best possible results. Current salt usage. Our target, based on history that we've seen in the past, is to have 2,500 tons in supply. Approximately 2,000 tons is what we've seen estimated annual salt use over the last 10, 15 years. That target of 2,500 tons is essentially to ensure that we have enough to make it through a bad winter, like the winter we had this year. This allows for bulk purchasing agreements at lower rates. So let's get into that Michigan My Deal cooperative buying agreement, and that is the most efficient way to spend your dollar on salt if you're buying salt. It also ensures a reliable supply for the duration of the season. We had an issue this year where we had a lot more than expected. Certainly a lot more snow, a lot more freeze thaw. The result of that was combined with the salt that we didn't have at the beginning of the year, is that we ran out of salt, and we had to order it. We were very fortunate to get it from Detroit Salt, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit too. We'll show you different types of salt that's in front of you there, and discuss those too. Our salt application rates, essentially the drivers, operators are set at 0, 100, 200 pounds a lane mile. That's their ability to dial into their equipment as it's moving down the road surface. Our 50-50 salt mix that we talked about, the application rates up to 400 pounds per lane mile, and we talked about where we use that in the hilly parts of town. Well, we have the ability in those trucks to go 0, 100, 200, 300 pounds per lane mile on those two routes. But it's depending on the conditions. It's the operators looking at the road surfaces and trying to understand what the weather's like when they're looking at them, and what's coming down behind them as they're driving down the road, and we're looking at the weather forecast and trying to decide what we might need for the rest of that night and the next day. Pre-wetting. Right now, pre-wetting, we're using 15 gallons per ton of Beat Heat plus a 23% brine solution. So that pre-wetting is what I talked about earlier. salt comes off the back of the truck and it gets doused with beet heat and salt brine. Salt storage. Our current salt storage facility is that salt is stored in a salt shed with an approximate 2,500 ton capacity. It's not delivered it all at once when we get our salt, so 2,500 ton is that capacity is sufficient. If not, we still have some other places to put it. There's a 50/50 sand salt shed that's stored in a separate storage shed. These are protected from the elements to provide loss and maintain quality. The long-term benefits of having a secure place to put your salt is that it allows for our bulk purchasing agreement at lower rates and ensures a reliable supply through each season. Liquid storage tanks, we currently have two 9,000-gallon tanks. That's what we mix our brine and our beet heat in. I mentioned earlier that we talked about comparisons to other municipalities, and we had those comparisons, but I wanted to start this slide or this dialogue with when we're talking about salt. There are essentially four salts that are in general practice. Sodium chloride, which is the salt that everybody knows is essentially table salt. Then there's potassium chloride, magnesium chloride, and calcium chloride. They're all considered salts. The salt, the comparative salt use compared to other northern Michigan municipalities, Traverse City maintains the same or lower application salt rates. The city at 0, 100, and 200 pounds per lane mile. Other agencies as high as 600 pounds per lane mile. Alternative approaches that we've been looking at and observed is that full liquid application. So a full liquid application means no more rock salt. Everything is put into liquid. It's put into a tank, and it's sprayed on the road surface. There are 2 municipalities that we talked to out of the 11 that are using this system, and it's something we've been looking into in the past. And you remember we talked a little bit earlier about that 2019 liquid application pilot. This is the result of keeping our eye open on those liquid applications. Typically, the folks that use full liquid application, we see a lot more of it being used in places where there's system snow rather than lake effect snow. And we'll get to the reasons why a little bit later when we talk about de-icing versus, when we talk about de-icing. The all salt alternatives, some municipalities, airports, bridge authorities are using calcium magnesium acetate in sensitive areas. The cost comparison we'll be talking about earlier, there's a couple of bags up there and we'll point those out. That is a product that is effective, melting snow and ice, that has less ecological environmental concerns. The key takeaway really from this slide is that there are opportunities to continue to explore full liquid applications and alternative de-icers while maintaining safe winter road conditions, and we're headed that way too. Alternative methods. So the salt alternatives that I just talked about, let me see where I put my bag description here, is the calcium magnesium acetate, CMA. 2 bags on your far right. Those are 2 of the calcium magnesium acetate. They're used on sensitive areas such as bridges and airports. They're mandated to be used on the Zilwaukee Bridge because of the federal dollars that went into building that. They're less corrosive for the iron, for the steel, and that mandate is the reason that they're actually using it. It's quite more expensive, less corrosive but expensive. $2,400 a ton versus $73 a ton. So something like 32 times more expensive than the salt products that we're using. mix effectiveness. And we've heard from these folks that are using it, and they say it works pretty good sometimes, but it doesn't work in all situations all the time. Full liquid application. The full liquid application is there are a couple of different ways to put this down. The anti-ice pretreatment, which is that setup that we talked about that basically doesn't put rock salt down, it's just spraying a liquid onto the road. The anti-ice pretreatment is for spraying on the road surface before a storm. You look at weather predictability, the weather service and the supervisors and superintendents make a decision whether or not to apply before a storm if they feel it's imminent, because you certainly don't want to be placing it on the road if you don't get the storm. We have lake effect conditions that are changing wildly, so there is room. There's certainly some room for this technology for us to use anti-icing and pretreatment, and that is certainly in our eyesight moving forward. The de-ice treatment is the full liquid can be used as a de-icer. So after the storm starts, if we get there, Chris might be able to tell you a story about how the folks downstate are using that, how often they're applying it. But they seem to have good luck, really good fortune with using the de-icing treatment either in anti-icing conditions or de-icing treatment after the storm starts. Kent County is using 75 gallons per lane mile of a mineral well brine, which is effective under optimal dew points. There are concerns of what's in the well brine because I think that's certainly a concern. Where the well brine's coming from and not knowing exactly what's in it is something that I think we all would be concerned about. Montcalm County uses a 90-10 blend of calcium chloride, beet heat, and these single applications lasting 12 hours. So I don't want to steal any Chris's thunder if we want to start off when we start asking questions, but essentially his conversation was with the folks at Montcalm County is that if they see something coming in, they'll go out 5:30 in the morning, spray it, spray the whole roadway, and it'll last 10, 12 hours. They make decisions whether or not they're doing that either during a storm or before a storm event. Hybrid liquid solid systems. So Kalkaska County has a pilot. It's a VBROC spreader. This is something that you'll be seeing coming to your desk for approval in the coming weeks. This VBROC spreader with a spray bar and increased liquid storage. They're using this at essentially at intersections with 30-gallon per lane mile, beet heat, and a de-ice master plus, what it's called. And the results, they've had really good results with reduced use and promising performance. So there certainly are alternative methods that we're working towards. It's on our radar, and you'll see purchase requests coming to the commission in the coming weeks that are requesting some of this equipment. Future steps. This leads right into essentially the next, exactly what I just said. On March 17, we're going to recommend that the city consider ordering 2,000 tons of salt. Right now, we walk around outside and it's 60 degrees and no one's thinking of salt or snow at all. But if you look at the weather until the end of April, we have, as far as every search engine I can find, we have nighttime temperatures below freezing until the end of April. End of April. So we still have a full 6 weeks left of potential freeze thaws or snow events. March 17, we're also going to be bringing the approval for the VBROC spreader with the liquid applicator. We just talked about that. Sorry. This is compatible with our new trucks, and there's a photo that I didn't show you because I didn't flip the slide, but this photo here shows the truck that we ordered in 2023 that just came in recently, and it's basically a shell, and that shell has to be upgraded with the equipment to allow us to use it for our salt application. The these new trucks were ordered, when we first ordered them, when we first talked about this, with the compatibility for the upgrades of the hydraulics that will allow us to work these systems. So when we first ordered these, the intent was to do some sort of liquid application. That's where we're headed to now. These trucks are in. They're at the at the upfitter, and they'll be there. Most likely, it's the truck boxes aren't even in, let alone the rest of the equipment that would have to go into them to be our trial truck for next season. But we're getting there. Future recommendations identified in the CIP. We talked a little bit about the state-of-the-art brine-making storage facility. This has been in the CIP for a while. Emmett County has had success mixing with their brine mixer. Allow us to have the best situations for brine mixing. Right now we have two 9,000-gallon tanks that sit outside. The best way to do this is to have them in a closed facility, basically in a closed facility with containment, so you can dial in precise amounts of brine dependent upon your experience and use. And then policy considerations is we'd like to secure a policy that the city secures an inventory of 2,500 tons for the entire winter season. So when we have the ability to store, we have the to store safely. Price of salt doesn't go down very often, if ever. Once in the last 14 years, I believe, in our research. It's essentially money in the bank. Just because we have it, we're not going to use it. That the reason it's there is to ensure that if we have one of the winters like we have right now, that we have the ability to deal with our road services. And then farther down the line, hopefully there can be a discussion of the level of service and an awareness, whether or not we do treat all the roads the way we have in the past. I think this commission has mentioned maybe there's an opportunity to treat local roads a little differently than we do majors and emergency routes. It's something that we wouldn't recommend as a team, but because we have the fire department, the police department, and the safety of the traveling public in mind, we're always going to opt for the safest version of what we think we're going to need to purchase. Thank you. I know it was a long presentation. There was a lot of information there, and I have the team members here to answer hopefully answer any questions.
Thank you, Frank. Do we have questions? Go ahead, Jackie.
Sure. Frank, it would be very helpful for me to understand the 2,500 ton purchase recommendation. What's the background? Where did that come from? And what's the rationale?
Sure. For as long as I've been here and longer, the target was built on the history of how much was used for previous years. So the target we would always shoot for when asking the commission was 2,000 ton, 2,000 ton of salt. Even at 2,000 ton, depending on what you have left from the previous year, we're not entirely saying that we're positive that we're going to make it through the year with 2,500, with 2,000 ton. Like this year, I think where somebody mentioned today, 184 or 194 inches of snow. Our average is typically that 118, 112 to 120. It's not just the snow; it's the freeze-thaw cycle. So that 2,000 ton that came from basically years of watching the amounts that we've used, and then looking forward to making sure that we have enough to cover us in a really bad year like this year.
You know, I was lacking any of this information before the meeting. I tried to kind of fill in some blanks myself from previous presentations, and it looked as though the last time that the City Commission actually approved purchase of 2,500 tons of salt was in the 2014-15 winter, and since then, the numbers have been 1,300, 800,000, 1,800, 1,800, 00, 1,800, so they've been quite a bit lower.
Yeah, can I
than
can I
2,500.
clarify
Hold
that
on,
too?
hold on, let's let
Finish?
Frank speak, yeah. And
May I
let Liz
finish? Thank you. And that the actual used amounts, actually, from what I could gather, have never reached 2,500 tons per year. So,
Sure.
I don't know, yeah, I think it would be helpful if, rather than my, going through and looking for that, if we could get some official numbers from you that would be comparable.
Sure. The numbers we have, really, what I think the part in that story that's missing is that we're not asking to buy 2,500 tons. What we're saying is that we believe having 2,500 tons in stock during the year is what we need. So those purchases you've seen in the past may have been because we had either a light or a heavy year the year before. So if we had 1,200 ton, or if we had 1,000 ton left, typically we'd be asking for another 1,000 ton to bring it up to, again, in the past I mentioned, we kind of used 2,000 ton in the past. So that was our game plan, was if we had 800 ton, we'd ask for 1,200 ton more, which is what we did, I believe, last year or the year before. And we asked for 1,200 ton, we had 800 ton, that would have brought us to 2,000. The city commission gave us 600 ton, and we ran out.
Liz, I think wanted to add to this.
Yeah, I just want to clarify what you're saying is the goal is to start each season with the same amount. So 2,500 is recommended, it's what we can store, it doesn't go bad, it's protected. The price of salt goes up every year. If we have a light winter, less salt is used, only 500 ton is used, then we would only come back that following year to ask to build it back up.
There's one clarifying piece of that is that we don't get all the snow, all the salt at the same time. So we're not asking to purchase 2,500 ton at one time. What we're asking for is to be able to secure 25 ton over the season. That typically comes in two shipments, the early delivery and the late delivery. So, and that's based on what we have left. We're taking what we have left every year, and then let's say we have 500 ton left this year, which is, we have a little less than that right now. Then we'd be asking for that 2,000 ton during the next season to bring us up to 2,500 ton.
Thank you.
So you're looking at 2,500 as sort of your safety stock going into a season?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Mitch and then.
Yeah, for
Heather.
context, 2014 and 2015 was the last winter that we had as much snow and as long a period of cold as we have this year.
Well, we don't, that's for the experts to get into, and I think, Jackie, your question was a really good clarifying point, so.
But
that
a
was-
question for
but-
Frank, could you give examples of other products, like we have gas purchases frequently, but we only have so much gas capacity, so we can't have a year's worth of gas, where we purchase as much as will top off our storage container for that good, but it's not necessarily related to how much we expect to use in a given year.
So are you asking Frank to kind of clarify, like, this, why we can do gas more frequently with the deliveries
No, I'm
versus
asking
salt?
if there's other products that we purchase in a similar way.
In bulk,
of
ahead.
There
we
are-
have so much space for them.
There are other products. And I talked about them a little earlier, some of those four salts that we talked about. So there are folks that are using those in different varietals. We've found what works best for
Yeah,
us.
I'm talking about ones that we already purchase. Like we purchase, you're suggesting we purchase as much salt as fits in the salt barn. We do purchase as much gas as fits in the gas tank. Do we have other products that we try to top off what will fit in the space that we have available for them?
The only thing I can compare it to would be our fuel purchases.
Okay.
So because it makes the most sense for us to buy 10,000 gallons at a time because they give us a break once we get to that amount. We have enough room to store it, so that's why we generally purchase fuel in that
Okay.
volume.
Frank. Heather, and then Jackie, I see you too.
So historically, you said it was 2,000 tons that was generally kept around. But you'd like it to be 2,500. Supposedly, you're using less salt on the roads. And then there's the brine usage. Is the salt that you're storing in the storage, is that used to make that brine? It seems like we're not even though we're supposedly saving salt on the lane mile, you're asking for more salt.
The dilution of salt in the process doesn't wind up creating a no-use salt situation. What it does is enables the salt that you're using to work more efficiently.
Well, really quick, can I
Yeah.
ask for a clarification point? Because I think what you're kind of asking is, and correct me if I'm wrong,
I
is
wanted
Heather's
to
saying
ask
is
two
like,
things.
is like, if we're getting 2,500 tons, does that then go to the, making the brine, et cetera? That's all part of that general, the large order?
I'm going to let Chris answer
Okay.
this because I really want him to get up and say a couple words
Okay.
as far as creating our brine.
Hello, Chris Weber, Street Superintendent. So yes, our road salt that we purchased in this bulk purchasing agreement is used to make our 23% salt brine. We had purchased in the 90s a brine maker. It's a large vessel that you fill with water, you dump salt in, and it churns it together to make a solution of 23% salt brine. And then we put that in the tanks. And then we order in bulk the beet heat from the manufacturer directly, which they then ship up in 4,600 gallon deliveries, which we blend 50-50. So 50%, 23% salt brine, and 50% beet heat. So we do use that road salt, the rock salt that we buy, to make that brine. So just as a visual representation, if I can approach.
Please.
So, just wanted to demonstrate a little bit of some of the materials that this is the salt from last year from Compass Minerals. They won the My Deal bid last year.
We've got a portable mic, sorry.
So,
Thank you.
all right, I'm at karaoke. So this is from Compass Minerals. They have mineral mining facilities throughout the United States. I don't know exactly where this came from, but this is from Compass Minerals from last year. This is this year's the 500 ton that we purchased from Detroit Salt, Morton Salt. It's a little bit finer. I'm not sure if that's just the process of them mining it or what, or if they refine it to make it a little finer. The blue color is a dye that's added to it to make it more visible as you're applying it, so the operators can see it better as it's being applied. This is what the salt actually looks like coming out of the back of our trucks. As you can see, this is a dry, loose, just a granular. This is the same salt when it's applied being pre-wet with our brine and beet heat mixture. So we calculated it down. This is 2 pounds of salt with 2 ounces of the beet heat brine mixture. So you can see it cakes together a little bit better. So that's where you get the reduction because there's less bounce and scatter, and it actually wants to stick to the roadway because it has sugars in it. It's beet molasses that's used, so it is actually sticky. It kind of smells like coffee. And then this is 5 pounds of road salt. This 5 pounds of road salt will treat 132 linear feet of a lane. So this is all that would be going onto a 132-foot lane. So that's all that's being applied. I kind of wanted to bring in 200 pounds to show what it would take to treat but my back said no. So we did reach out to some alternatives. I was trying to think, we were trying to brainstorm who would be the most knowledgeable about wanting to use the most ecological, environmentally friendly product. People on the water, or how about directly over the water? So we thought bridges. So I talked to MDOT Garage that maintains the Zilwaukee Bridge. As Frank said, that was built with federal dollars, so it was required from the time that it was built that calcium magnesium acetate was the only de-icer, anti-icer to be used because it is less corrosive to concrete and iron. So they don't get the concrete spalling like you would get from salt, but it is required by law. and it's very expensive. Ton of salt is approximately $73, $75. A ton of this is $2,400. And I said, you said $2,400, correct? And he said, yes. It works good, but there's things that can make it work better. You can apply it with our brine solution, but the knock it out of the park combo is when it's paired with potassium acetate, which is like $10 a gallon. So you're spraying that potassium acetate on it as it's being applied. We talked to a couple private contractors and municipalities at airports, and they use that because it's not corrosive to the aircraft, and they're required to use it by law. So these are just, I wanted to also give a representation of, this is 2.8 pounds of CMA, and then this is 2.8 pounds of road salt. So it's about double the volume. So our trucks would hold half as much. The application rate, what they're using, they used a square foot, but calculating it out, it's the same, basically 200 pounds per lane mile. So the same amount, pounds per lane mile will be applied, but it's twice the volume. So.
Great. Thank you.
I have another question.
Sure.
So it seems like in one part of this presentation, you're saying that the brine use reduces the actual use of the road salt. Is that true?
It is. And in the municipalities that we've talked to, the common consensus is that the number one step to reduce your salt use is pre-wet. And out of some of the municipalities that I talked to, a couple of them still aren't even doing that because they've got old technology. They're using what they've always used, 600 pounds per lane mile. They want the roads bare, and that's what it takes to make it happen. So the widely known first step is pre-wetting. Not only does it reduce loss and scatter, it also helps the salt work faster and create that solution on the roadway to penetrate the salt, get to the surface, melt, and run off to the edge. So it does, and that's widely known in the industry, that to reduce salt use, the first step is pre-wetting.
So a policy that said we needed to purchase 2,500 tons a year would not, that maybe is not such a great idea, because maybe in 5 years, 3 years, we're actually only using 1,500 tons of salt.
And that could be reevaluated. We had looked at our season usage totals over the past 10 plus years, and it depends largely on weather. And it's not just snowfall. You could have to treat the roadway in a freeze-thaw event, a rain event. So you could get a nice warm sunny day, the water melts on the uphill side of the road, runs across, refreezes, and you got ice. So over the past 10 plus years, the highest usage we've had was approximately 2,400 tons, and the lowest was about 800 tons. And that largely depends on the weather.
Okay.
So
Do you have any idea how much salt got used thus far this year?
This year?
Starting in November, because really we've had snow
we've
since
got all those
November.
numbers. Yeah.
17?
Yeah, it's right around, with the 500 that we had been allowed to purchase, the season total will be about 2,200. We're right around 500, so we've used about 1,700 tons
Okay.
this season.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I just wanted to clarify, they're not recommending purchasing 2,500 tons every year. It's just to start the season at the same amount every year.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
a policy generally means it's,
Well, I think we'd have to work on the language. I think they're saying the language of the policy would be that
To
the
start
city
with the same
commission will-
consistent amount
yeah.
of salt every year, and then the following year, you would buy, depending on what was left in the barn, to get to that consistent number.
Not of buying a consistent
except
number.
that hopefully we're using less. The more,
Right.
like with this new truck, the more brine we're using, we're not going to need 2,500 pounds.
Right. Hopefully.
Yeah, and just because we have it, doesn't mean we'll use it. It can stay in the barn for as long as, feasibly possible. It won't go bad, it's out of the elements. So I really hope we do reduce the amount that we use. And we've seen really good, the beet heat is a promising, And if you look at their website where they're using it, it was a pretty small Minnesota and that type of area, and it's expanded drastically out into the New York and area, Pennsylvania, stuff like that. And it works good. It's an alternative to rock salt, granular salt. So, and we do hope Kalkaska County has the same hybrid sander setup, V-Box spreader. So from what I was explained from the manager there, when they get to intersections, they kick on the spray bar, they're spraying the liquid directly on the road at the rate of 30 gallons per lane mile at intersections only, which is equivalent to how we would treat our local streets. So our plan is, we've identified a route that's somewhat off, separate from the other areas where we won't have a lot of other trucks cutting through it. We have a route that's close to the shop that we could designate this hybrid sander on and say, we are only going to run liquid in this route, only at intersections, and that way we can thoroughly evaluate its effectiveness, and that way it's separate from all the other stuff, but that same truck can do double duty. It can still go out on the highway and run granular if, we still continue to do that. Hopefully, we'll see results with this liquid trial where we can continue to reduce that granular rate and maybe increase the liquid rate. So,
Thank you so much for your deep interest in this subject. I really appreciate it.
No, I take pride in what we do. The guys are out there, like I said, in the middle of the night, worst conditions. We live here. I grew up here, born and raised. I love this area, and I understand the concern, and it's in the forefront. Our number one is safety. Our number two is the environment. So,
Thank
All
you
right.
for that. And Jackie's been waiting patiently, so thank you.
Thank you. Just to respond to Commissioner Treadwell's question about snowfall, I did visit the National Weather Service site from Gaylord, and they had Traverse City snowfall amounts dating back to 2009, 2010. Of course, their records go back much further, but that was where our salt information began. And for this season to date, they're recording 132.5 inches in Traverse City. There were 123.4 inches in 17-18, 128.4 inches in 13-14. So while we've got huge piles of snow, 132 inches per season is not that far beyond normal. And I would ask, in terms of giving us some real solid decision-making data, if we could understand season by season, your beginning inventory, how much was purchased, how much was used, and then what the snowfall records showed for that season. I would really appreciate having something like that.
I think that's helpful, but I would also request, I'm going to say that something they've mentioned, and so I'm going to see if this wants to be included in the request, was it's not just snowfall, they're also talking about the freeze and thaw, and that affects how much ice they drop as well.
Good
Are we
point.
asking for that data, or are we using the snowfall as kind of a benchmark, but not the only one?
Mayor, I'd like to say one other thing, is that please remember that you're talking about the snowfall here. The numbers I gave earlier come from the Grand Traverse County Garage. You can look on their website. So I didn't use the Gaylord. I used our local version of. We have a little pool around here every once in a while. Everybody tries to guess closest to without going over the amount of snow. And our engineering department today mentioned that they heard that the county garage we are now at 184. So last time I looked was about 2 weeks ago, and it was 164 at that time at the Grand Traverse County Garage.
And given where we're at with our federal agencies and funding, I would prefer if we kept to local numbers anyways for consistency for the next few years. So at least that's what I'll be looking for my decisions.
Okay.
I just have one.
Oh, Jackie, you can continue. And then,
This is a separate topic, but one that's been raised. Can we hear your point of view in terms of different approaches to snow removal on low traffic, low speed residential roads, for instance, versus some of our higher speed, higher traffic corridors? Is there any opportunity there to make progress?
I think we can send around our SOPs, and our SOPs essentially, I was hoping that would come out of tonight's meeting, is that it would pique some other interest. We were thinking about including it in the presentation. We didn't. We could certainly provide it. Those SOPs essentially reflect our understanding of the level of service. So for the MDOT route, essentially for MDOT, they are recommending or asking us to perform a level of service that is a entire road width free and clear of ice and snow. Right down to the pavement is basically what they're recommending. And of course, they realize that it's somewhat of an impossibility because as the snow continues to come down, you can only move it so quickly. But their recommendation, their desire for the Act 51 funding that we receive for maintaining their road is a road surface completely free and clear of snow and ice. We use that same mentality for our emergency routes because when we talk about fire and police, ambulances and such, we want to be sure that they're receiving the same ability to get the people that are in need of emergency services. On our SOPs also talk about locals and alleys. So we really don't put it in any alleys. We do put it at the alley intersections where they come in the streets, especially where they're steep, because those are conditions where places where you might have someone slide into the road. On those little local streets we have, we're targeting 50 to 75 feet either side of a stop sign out of the intersection. That's the only place we're putting any material, is right there. We're not really, we're plowing the rest of it, but we're trying to confine that material to the place that'll do the most. Good. People are crossing on those intersections on bicycles, on pedestrians and cars. So we're trying to create safe conditions for the entire traveling public.
Thank you.
So it sounds as though you're confident that the current policies and procedures are as salt thrifty as they can be?
I think that if there was a desire from the commission to head in a different direction, that our standard operating procedures could be augmented, amended to reflect the commission's desires. I think from what you'll hear from staff is that right now we're doing it the best way we can in the safest manner that we can. And if this body decides to do something different, you certainly have the option to do that.
My question was the same as Jackie, so you answered it. Thank you. I mean, I don't know. This is kind of Commissioner Werner's bailiwick here. And, but you answered my question. Thank you very much.
Do we have other questions right now? I guess a couple questions that I had really quick just to help me kind of conceptualize everything is, it sounds like you're wanting to invest in some of these different ways of applying, and you're continually looking for things to improve, which I appreciate. When we're talking about like the difference between our trunk lines and heavily trafficked roads versus our residential roads, I was just trying to remember, and maybe nobody has the answer off the top of their head, but other than a little part of Parsons, is there any street in the city that's over 35 miles an hour? I can think of a couple that are 35, but most are 25.
I'm going to let either the data specialist or the operations
And if
person
nobody
answer
knows
that
it, it's
question.
fine. You can follow up after. I was, just as we're
Silver
talking
Lake.
about it. What?
Silver Lake.
We can provide that
Oh,
information.
yeah, that's right.
if you
There's a
like.
part of that Silver Lake that's in the city limit too. So some of the outer edge parts, but for the most part are,
Garfield,
you can,
the only thing I can think of would be Garfield down towards Bill Marsh, even though the city limit is at
yeah, that's what I was
Boone
thinking.
Street, but, to Bill Marsh, that's, in the city. And then Division Street to Fitzhugh is the city limit, that's 45, once you get south of 14th
Right, Fitzhugh,
Street.
yep. Okay.
But everything else is either 25 or 35.
And thank you for that, because what I was just trying to conceptualize is most of our streets are 25, 35, not as high speed. They're kind of the outside spokes, or we hit a couple spots where we hit 45. So I was just trying to visualize where our big differences might be between our trunk lines and our city streets. But for the most part, they're kind of within that 10-mile-an-hour zone with a couple tiny, or hundreds of feet of exception, not miles. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Go ahead, Jackie.
It would, I hope I understood this correctly, that you said that Emmett County is using full liquid?
I don't believe they're using full liquid, but what they have is and it's been a few years, so at the time, it was a state-of-the-art brine mixing and storage facility. So it's a concrete building, and it has multiple tanks in it that store different products. So like we only have 2 tanks, and we mix them, so we only have one mixture. That's all we have. So they have beet heat in this one, calcium chloride in this one, well brine in this one, and then they have a system that will pull measured amounts from each tank to make whatever blend you want. So this truck is on this route, let's put this blend in it. This truck is on this route, let's put this blend in it. And that's kind of what we were, wanting to get to, is not only to have the increased storage capacity, but have the option to calibrate or mix, change the mixtures as we go based on either temperatures or whatever else. So that's kind of what we are modeling it after. Is I don't believe they're running a full liquid, but it's the storage and it's the mixing facility.
Thank you.
Great.
I'd like to mention some other quick technologies that we kind of moved past. There is an effort by the state to put in in-ground temperature sensors. There are companies out there we get contacted by once a month or every couple weeks. There are places on the planet, Sweden, Norway, that have in-ground temperature sensors about less than every quarter mile. And it's built into a web-based software product that lets them measure temperature at the road surface. Right now, our trucks measure temperatures as we're driving down the road with sensors, but they're not as accurate. They're okay, but they're not accurate enough to create a mix design like what Chris was just talking about, with the details so that you can tweak it to a level based on temperature, humidity, and dew point, temperature, and on-the-ground road conditions. They're basically what they're doing there is taking this wonderful web application or this program, and they're designing their brine mixes or their icing, de-icing, somewhat on the fly as it exists on the ground. So there are a lot of other avenues to pursue. Certainly, we're also looking into ways to quantify the measurements in our salt barn, to basically set up some infrared cameras that will measure the exact amount of salt in that barn to pretty accurate levels. We can do that now, approximately. We know what we got delivered because we get lift tickets. We get run tickets from the company that delivers it. But also, wouldn't it be nice to know exactly how much is coming out of the garage, out of the salt barn, and then compare it to what the numbers say on the equipment that's dispersing the salt too. And there's ways to improve the accuracies and efficiencies that we're certainly interested in. We just haven't gotten there yet.
So we know you'll be coming next week to us with some salt and salt-related items. I appreciate something like that being shared. I think if I would say to the commission, either this week or next week, as we get into it, if that is something that elaborate is something we'd want to get into, that we would ask that that number be presented somewhere. We hear a lot of ideas. We hear a lot of even, like, I remember when we switched over to beet heat, there was a cost with everything. And these are big costs sometimes to put sensors everywhere. Not saying that it's not worth it, but I think if we want people to move in that direction, I think we need numbers with things. Or if we want to see how a year of the new spreader and everything works, just making a note to staff to bring that up in a year or so. So asking for commission guidance on that as we go forward, as we're having some of these conversations. Go ahead, Heather, and then Jackie.
Yes. I think we need a year to see how the new machine's working. Hopefully it's working next year. Where is the salt stored right now?
Sorry?
Where is the salt barn right now?
At Department of Public Services, the very east side.
Hey, don't give away too much. Just kidding.
Northeast side is the salt barn for rock salt, and then what was essentially just inside our grate on the north side is this 50/50 salt sand mix. So we have, you know, two different areas. Essentially, the salt delivery, what you're seeing there, the Detroit salt, that gets placed in that salt barn on the northeast corner of our
And do
property.
you have enough room there to build the state-of-the-art mixing shed for your brine storage?
I think that depends on what future plans for that
Property
piece of property is. I know there are some folks that are requesting the possibility of putting a cell tower in some places. Depends on
Future use.
yeah. Do we have the room to put something there right now? I think we do by moving things around, but I don't know what the use is going to be moving forward.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Just a request that, can this PowerPoint be
Yes.
retroactively added to our agenda packet so it's available to all?
I think it could be sent out and then.
It
let
can be
on-site.
added to the city website. If we alter the agenda packet, any notes you may have made will disappear.
And I would,
So-
yeah, and I like Jackie's idea. I also hate to put it on a former meeting that people might not see, so putting it on the website maybe, so
Great.
people can find it. Does that sound good?
You bet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we could also add it to the 17th
Yes.
as an addendum to the purchase
idea.
requests.
And
But on the city website is a really good idea.
the other thing I would say, if we want to look at doing that kind of storage, because that's interesting to me as well, but you did say it was Emmett County, which is an entire county with a lot of different road types and speeds and terrain, and so I'd be curious if how smaller units like ours, that there's a much smaller footprint, use that, and if they find that much diversity needed, or is it one or two tanks? You know, what does that maybe look like for a smaller scale like our own versus like if we were in charge of the entirety of Grand Traverse County? So put that in the cap for later. Any other questions right now? Okay. I think because of the very different presentation topics we have tonight, I'll go ahead and allow public comment on this item. If anybody would like to make public comment on the road salt discussion, please feel free to approach the podium.
I'm going to read the rules real quick. We ask that you state your name and address, indicate if you are a city resident, non-city resident, and/or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment per speaker. When your time has elapsed, the timer will beep, and we finally request that all language be respectful to all parties.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Sarah Uren. I'm the program director at the Watershed Center, Grand Traverse Bay. I know Frank really well. We've worked together many years on lots of different projects. So I'm not a city resident, but I work for an environmental nonprofit protecting the water quality in the Bay that we all love. I just wanted to say on behalf of the Watershed Center, we appreciate the discussion that you all are having about road salts, especially as it pertains to responsibly using them and making reductions where possible. I want to say that while road salts help keep roads, parking lots, and sidewalks free from ice, they're also a major source of chloride pollution in our waters, as I think we all can understand. We have been monitoring chloride levels in Kids Creek for nearly 5 years, and we're finding that high concentrations of chlorides are reaching Kids Creek and impairing aquatic life in the winter months. We have different monitors that we have in a couple sections of the creek, and we can see spikes during melt events and snow events where salts are being put on the roads. And we are meeting with Frank, as he said, later this week, and we will continue to be a resource to city staff and the commissioners as this discussion continues. We're here to help and offer our advice, although I think that the presentation tonight, this very well thought out, and they are really knowledgeable about this, but we are here to help in the capacity of what we do best. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we're going to end that. We are going to take about 5 minutes so that they can switch over the presentation and get everything ready. I think we have one student in the crowd. Today's your lucky day. We're going to go ahead and sign your sheet during this break, and you can leave. A lot of times, they're stuck here 2-3 hours, so you picked a really good meeting.
Told him it was a possibility at the beginning.
I know, aren't I so nice?
You got
Who's your favorite elected? I'm just kidding.
Look at me. He doesn't get it. He's trying. Like, you know.
No, no, no. All right, we're going to go ahead and call the study session back to order here. And our next topic is governance training and strategic planning readiness. We're kind of in the middle of strategic planning because of some rescheduling, but still very important, still very relevant. So I'm just going to hand it off and kind of let you run the show now.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all again. I think I've met most everyone, except for maybe some that are not here tonight. I am Jen Ferguson. I'm with Barry Dunn. And my colleague here, Michelle, will introduce ourselves in just a bit, but we wanted to let you know that we are happy to be here. Finally, you see the date on the presentation is November, and due to some circumstances, needed to reschedule that, but nonetheless, our work here with the city is for governance training and strategic plan readiness. It is a critical piece to strategic planning. So I mentioned I'm Jen Ferguson. I'm a senior consultant with Barry Dunn. I'm serving as the project manager on this engagement as well as a facilitator. Prior to joining the firm, I spent almost 30 years in local government in executive leadership roles. I'm a former city administrator, former administrative services director. I started my career as a finance director decades ago, as a finance director. And so I have a passion for strategic planning, passion for organizational development, and that is why I am here tonight to work with you all on governance training and being ready for the strategic plan. I'm going to pass it on to Michelle Kennedy. Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Michelle Kennedy with Barry Dunn. I'm a manager in our local government practice group. I've been consulting with local governments for almost 28 years. Prior to that, I served in government for about a decade. So this is clearly a passion of mine. You could choose to do a lot of different things, and I continue to choose to assist local governments in planning their futures and in developing their organizations. So we're glad that we're able to be with you this evening. And I think, do I have the next slide, Jen?
You do. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. So our purpose tonight is to make sure that there is a clear sort of understanding of governance on the City Council with roles, responsibilities, relationships clear. The whole point of this is to help you build stronger relationships on the commission and learn to work collaboratively as a unified body. This purpose of this mini training and mini workshop is to also recognize the ethical and legal responsibilities that you have as a local government elected body, and the important role that you play in decision making on behalf of your community and the residents and businesses of your community. Next slide, please. So what is governance? Governance is the structure that you have in place that allows you to provide good oversight and good strategic direction so that you can make good decisions as the elected official of your community. And what the importance of governance, it really focuses around sort of some fundamental tenets about government. It sets up clear decision-making processes for you. It creates accountability, both amongst you as commission members and fellow elected officials, but also with the leadership that helps to run city operations. And then transparency with the community, transparency with all of your constituents and the stakeholders in the community and residents. It helps also to reduce conflict, or when there is conflict, to be able to manage it very, very easily. And then it sets the stage for good strategic planning, which you're engaged in right now. Jen, I think we turn this over to you at this point.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yes.
All right. So what we first want to talk about, especially with strategic planning, Michelle mentioned it is the cornerstone for the electeds and a critical key role in the strategic planning process that you understand first roles and responsibilities to set the stage for strategic planning to ensure that it's successful, so that the strategic plan is adopted, that it is not something that's going to sit on the shelf, and that's going to be implemented. So it's critical that the elected group who play the sponsorship role understand what their roles and responsibilities are. So what we wanted to do is to go over some of the high-level both roles and responsibilities of the City Commission. Those include developing and approving ordinances. You know that this is your role, is that you develop the ordinances, you approve policy that guides how Traverse City is now and how it will be in the future. Your oversight is to monitor implementation of those ordinances, and we'll talk about who carries that out. Representation, you represent the interest of all constituents, and advocacy means that you champion causes that align with city vision and the needs of the whole community. On the responsibility side, we want to talk about three kind of areas. One is fiduciary. That is where you are the stewards of resources, not only just the money that comes in, but how those resources are utilized, staffing, equipment, and capital investments. You're also responsible for adherence, to follow legal and ethical standards that are set from a federal, state, local level, and even the city of Traverse City. And that's where you set those adherences, those legal and those standards. And then you act. That is one of their main responsibilities, is that you maintain the public's best interest, not your self-interest or the interest of a few. It's always something that when you join a voluntary group, such as an elected commission or a council or a board or what have you, is that you come with your voice, but you speak with one voice of the board. So diving a little bit deeper into ethical standards for elected officials and accountability mechanisms, there are ethical standards that are inherent in being an elected board. Conflicts of interest, disclosure, and management. That's a tough one, is that when there is a conflict of interest, it needs to be disclosed and it needs to be adhered to. Transparency and openness in decision making means that those conflict of interest need to bubble to the surface and have a conversation about what they may be, work through them, and then move on to the decision making process. Adherence to codes of conduct and ethics. There are many communities in the United States that have very strict codes of conduct. Typically that's your commission rules, but also ethical ordinances, ethical policies, things of that nature. Those are very common and important because it sets the stage for what's expected, but also it sets the stage for how it gets adhered to and enforced. Accountability mechanisms include regular reporting to the public. You are required to, under Michigan state law, to do regular reporting. There's certainly performance reviews and audits that can be done to ensure that you're meeting those ethical standards that are required of you. And then, of course, there's ensuring it's that legal compliance, such as your public open meeting laws, your anti-corruption policies, things of that nature that you are required to uphold. Legal responsibilities, these are fiduciary responsibilities of the commission. You have the duty of care, that is acting prudently with the public resources. Again, not just those dollars that come in, those public funds, but also how you use those resources from a staffing and capital perspective. There's a duty of loyalty where you put the city's interests above personal interests and the interests of a few. And so that then leads to that duty of obedience to ensure that you as the commission comply with all laws, regulation, and commission policies. And your role, one of the key parts of this fiduciary responsibility, is to ensure that you avoid liability, avoid those lawsuits by staying informed and adhering to your responsibilities, as well as your responsibilities as a board, as an elected body. There's the roles of the mayor. They're different in some communities with the form of government, but in the city of Traverse City, the mayor is the presiding officer, facilitates commission meetings. And we're going to talk a little bit deeper about how meetings and following decorum is very important. It seems kind of silly. It seems like it's a lot of extra effort in order to maintain order and decorum, but nonetheless, the presiding officer is responsible for that. The mayor in your city, as you know, votes on all matters. It is a seat, it is a position that the mayor, someone runs for. Leading with neutrality, that's some skills that are needed, as well as promoting collaboration. Well, there you are. So the roles of the commission and city management, one of the things that we like to address is the differences between the roles of an elected body, the commission, and city management in the commission manager form of government that you have. The commission sets the vision, the mission, and the strategic goals or strategic priorities. And when we talk about the strategic planning process, this is a critical piece where the city commission plays, is that you will set the priorities for your strategic plan, and then you will adopt ordinances, maybe you will address policy that will help you achieve your mission. The roles of the city management then are to execute your vision, mission, and strategic goals. This in other terms might mean that the city manager carries out your policy, enforces city ordinances, and manages the day-to-day operation. And that is the one difference, is that day-to-day operations in your form of government means that a city manager carries out those day-to-day operations. And just a side-by-side comparison of those roles, again, City Commission sets the vision, mission, and strategic goals, adopts ordinances and policies, and then the city management, city manager, and her team executes those vision, mission, and strategic goals, carries out those policies, and again manages the day-to-day operations. In order for effective communication between the commission and management then, we want to talk a little bit now about what it means to ensure that there is effective communication and partnerships, and that means that there needs to be regular defined collaboration framework set. There needs to be boundaries set. The electeds do play their part, and city management plays their part. And sometimes there needs to be boundaries set, there needs to be mutual trust and respect, and there also needs to be an understanding of each other's roles to avoid micromanagement. Collaboration is another key piece to effective city commission interactions with each other, as well as with city management. It's based on principles of teamwork. One of the things that I have worked with elected boards across the U.S., I primarily served in Minnesota, so I know about snow removal and salt. But I also worked in the state of Washington, and it doesn't matter essentially, where the community is at, but there is the need for effective teamwork, and that when you are elected to a board or a commission or a council, you come as one, but you become a group, and that is where that critical decorum and open and respectful communication are needed. Active listening, interactive discussions. You have this workshop, this format, so that is a nice way for you to dive into topics at those work sessions. It's at your regular meetings when the decisions are happening. That's where structure has to happen. That's where it's important that you have to work on collective decision making and conflict resolution to ensure that you can overcome common challenges, such as personal conflicts, political disagreements, competing priorities, and perhaps a split commission. It's not uncommon that there are 4 to 3s or 3 to 4s or 7 to 1s or 6 to 2s. It just doesn't make a difference. It's common. Not every decision is a unanimous decision for elected boards. Many ways to overcome that are to establish shared vision and strategic goals, and that is where a strategic plan can help. The community can help the commission in deciding on strategic priorities that you come to a consensus on, that you can all get around and support. You can keep those discussion issue focused, not personal. Foster a culture of trust and respect as you work on your strategic plan priorities and goals, and then uphold the vote of the commission. Collaboration promotes the exchange of really good ideas. It keeps discussions issue focused, which leads to innovative and efficient problem solving and solutions. Cohesiveness is important between the commission members, so we want to talk a bit about that because trust and collaboration lead to that effective government. Diversity of thought enriches decision making, and conducting meetings efficiently is very important to ensure that you remain cohesive as your term is on the board. Some strategies for building those relationships are regular commission retreats and development activities, transparent communication, and recognizing and respecting individual contributions. I think just to give you an example of what those retreats look like, maybe you have had retreats, but one of the things that I always found helpful for the councils that I worked with was, whether it's called a retreat, whether it's a day-long workshop, but it's a way for you to get to know your other electeds, your other peers on the board, have a dialogue. It's not a decision-making time, but it's there for you to start to build those relationships, build trust, but also kind of talk big picture. But again, it's not a decision-making time. It's priority setting, it's understanding others' views, and so it's a very useful way for you to strengthen relationships and build up that cohesiveness. So conducting effective commission meetings, you've all heard of Robert's Rules of Orders, but what I wanted to specifically talk about in this slide and at this time is that conducting effective commission meetings, it's really important that you consider following Robert's Rules of Order or the Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure because it is important for the process of the meeting, for getting to decisions, and it's something that helps when there is conflict, if sticking with some of these very critical steps in the motion setting, in the amending a motion, things of that nature. It's very important because when you are at your regular commission meetings, you've gone through that process to learn about the topic, and you've studied the issue, you've argued, you arm wrestled, you've agreed, you've found consensus. But keys to an effective commission meeting that then means is that you set clear agendas, you've reviewed your packets in advance, you've had those conversations in advance, but also that you set the framework for the questions to be had in advance. So these workshops are a very beneficial way to do that. Or having another framework that you might consider establishing could be beneficial to ensure that you get all of your questions answered before it comes to a vote, so that you are not rehashing an issue again and again, but yet you are moving on those topics and you are deciding or not on an issue and then moving forward. Active listening in the commission meetings, it's encouraged that that all get to speak in a very routine, regimen way. That's Robert's Rules of Order, and that you focus on managing your time, as well as managing the topics. Decision-making, that is consensus building using voting protocols. There are a number of training opportunities. One that I have listed here that I have used in order to create some of these materials for governance training comes from Mastering Council Meetings by Jurassic Parliament. So there are many sources, but there is one Jurassic Parliament. If you've not ever seen or heard of Anne McFarlane, you ought to meet her or her process for understanding Robert's Rules of Order in a very easy way to help ensure that your meetings are run smoothly. And then, of course, ensure that those decisions are documented and followed through, and standing by those decisions, even if you disagree with the answer, even if you disagree with the vote. That is consensus. So some common causes and tools that I wanted to just share with you about conflict resolution are, of course, personal disagreements, power struggles, and different priorities. And so I think that would be summing up probably elected boards. Prevention tools are clear, defined communication channels. That's what I've talked about. Is setting those ground rules for those discussions. Taking a look at your commission rules of procedures or other Robert's Rules of Orders format or frameworks that you could consider that would perhaps make conversations easier. And then, of course, ways to resolve conflicts, certainly address the issues before they escalate, and establishing and focusing on those shared vision and strategic goals. And again, that's what strategic plan is going to do. It's going to provide you with those shared priorities, those shared goals that you've all agreed to focus on and use over the next 5-year period. And then, of course, asking for mediation when there's, when there's an issue that pops up. Having a third party come in and facilitate is always something that's recommended if there is conflict resolution that is needed. All right, so I want to stop there. The next part of the presentation is really where we wanted to provide our assessment about the City of Traverse City's readiness for strategic planning. Our goal here was to help the city with understanding what the strategic planning effort will be, what the effort necessary to ensure that it is a successful process, and whether additional capacity might be needed or other steps might need to be taken. So I wanted to pause to see if the commission had any questions so far, but then also to see if Michelle had anything that she had wanted to add.
I had a quick question based on the first presentation. One of the things that was mentioned and I've heard often is, the commission being able to have a retreat, someplace where you could get to know each other, because basically once everybody's sworn in, OMA applies here, and it makes it difficult. OMA is very strict on I shouldn't say strict, it's very specific on what it talks about. We can't deliberate as a body outside of the public view. I think, though, out of an abundance of caution and understandably for public perception, any gathering of the commission, even if we're not deliberating, can be seen as, or might be interpreted as OMA or can raise concerns about that. Do you all, and it can be followed up with us, have suggestions about how people or how groups can do retreats or form that bond with that all in mind?
Mm-hmm. That's a common concern, and in many states it's similar. So in Washington State, the same issues about Open Public Meetings Act, OPA. And so one of the ways that communities that I was in, they still did their retreats, but the public was invited. The public, though, was made aware that the council is going to have a retreat. It is going to be for consensus building. It's for collaboration. It's for building the team. Not necessarily that you need to agree or that you need to become best friends, but it's a way to understand how one commissioner operates versus another, typically then the public doesn't attend. And if they do attend, great. Then they are not necessarily part of the process, because if you are not required to have public comment, or you are required, then you can build that in to a retreat. But it is made clear with the community that you are going into retreat. You are going to have just a dialogue amongst peers. You are not deciding anything. There is nothing for you to decide, but rather you might have it facilitated. There might be team building exercises that you can go through. So it's really something that you have to be okay with. You know, the public has to come, then they're invited, and they're aware of what it is that the commission is going to be talking about. Great question. Michelle, did you have anything to add to that? All right.
Okay, great. Any other? All right, we'll move on to part 2.
Okay. All right, so readiness for strategic planning. So there are some keys to successful strategic planning and the process for strategic planning. One of them is organizational readiness. And so we applaud the city and the commission for looking at, are we ready for strategic planning? Because hearing that you're not, that's tough. Hearing the bad parts or hearing something that's not going well, that's really tough to hear. But we applaud you for going through an organizational readiness, because we spoke with the commission members, we spoke with city staff, and so we really enjoyed meeting everyone to understand what they thought were strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and challenges. And so a readiness assessment shares with you where your capacity is and whether or not you're ready. Now that doesn't mean that you stop, that you don't go forward. There have been times when we have had to tell communities, don't go forward. I mean, that's just reality. Because you need to remedy those issues before you start the strategic planning process to ensure that you would be successful. So sponsorship and participation. I had mentioned this when we started this presentation, is that the commission serves as the sponsor of the strategic planning process. You play a very critical role in ensuring that this process goes smoothly, because this means that you are setting your priorities, you are setting the vision for the community, and you are ready and willing to devote the time needed to discuss what is truly important to the community. The commission serves as a sponsor, and it legitimizes the strategic planning process. You're the cheerleader. You know, yes, you are adopting it, but you play a critical role in ensuring that it is successful. Leadership and support, supporting city management. They serve as your strategic planning champion who understands what the process is. They're committed. They're going to ensure that all of the participants that involved in the strategic planning process come together and focus on what's important. Other keys to success include building common understanding. This is where you would clearly communicate the purpose to all stakeholders, to all participants in the strategic planning process, that you're going to engage in analysis and discussion to build that understanding. You have to understand what your current state is in order for you to move on into your future, to understand where your strategic priorities and goals are going to lie, because you have to first ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? You have to be able to answer that question. Decision-making and implementation. Aside from adopting the strategic plan and setting the vision, implementing the strategic plan is tough. It is tough because it takes action. It takes connecting the budget to your strategic plan. And so what you put in that plan, those goals that you're going to work on, means that you're likely going to focus budget dollars there. You're going to focus resources there so that you can accomplish those priorities and those goals. And so that's where you connect the city operations to the strategic plan, and that comes through the city manager's office. And then designing it for success. Strategic planning means that you need to take into consideration your existing planning efforts, your management structure, the routines necessary to create the strategic planning process that's unique to your community. You need to set realistic expectations to accomplish the strategic planning process to ensure that staff can focus on day-to-day operations, because the city doesn't shut down. While you're going through a strategic planning process, it's a parallel process so that you can set your vision, but of course, day-to-day operations need to occur. This chart is one that helps to kind of identify policy-making framework, and you can see where we wanted to share with you where the strategic plan sits with regards to state and federal laws, city commission, your ordinances of the community, city policy. You can see that those are city commission and federal and state lawmakers. So anything above the red line from a what are we going to focus on, where does board action need to happen, below the red line, essentially, which is the strategic plan, is where the city manager, the city management takes on those directives, carries out the commission's policies, carries out the strategic plan priorities and objectives that are set. And so you can see whose role above the red line is city commission, and below the red line is management. And that's the strategic plan is what the city is going to focus on, and the implementation planning is how the city is going to carry out and achieve those goals and strategic priorities. All right, so I mentioned that we talk with participants and stakeholders, staff, the commission on the readiness of for the strategic planning process. And so the big question is, should we proceed? And we provided this in the framework of questions, because and with a yes, maybe, and no from a response to let you know what we heard and what we think you should consider as you go forward with your strategic planning process. So the question about, has the City Commission agreed to sponsor and support the process? We believe so, because you are moving forward with the strategic planning process. And so the question about supporting the process, we want to make sure that, and that if it's something that needs to, we have to have a dialogue on about, you've approved the strategic planning process. Do you support the strategic planning process? Is the city manager ready to champion the process? Yes, and maybe. The city management needs to know that there is going to be support for the strategic planning process. So that's a critical question to answer. Are there resources of time and commitment available to do the planning? Yes, and maybe. That again is after you set your strategic priorities and goals, will you be able to support efforts towards achieving those goals? And that means that connecting the strategic plan to your budget. Will we commit to implementing the plan and linking the budget? That's also a yes and a maybe. Again, that comes with your budget process when you're talking through, how you are going to set your budget for the next fiscal years. Then you would want to have your strategic plan as part of the discussions to say, is this budget allocation connected to a strategic priority? And that's something when it comes to reporting on strategic plan, that's a key piece of information that you want to have. Another question is about, will the process create value for the community and the city organization? That's a yes. In all of the strategic plans that Barry Dunn has done and worked with other communities on, it has led to creating value for the city. Because you set your vision you set your North Star, you have a roadmap towards the future, and you continually worked on that, yes, it is going to create value for the community because you are going to be achieving goals. And is now the right time to initiate the process? Well, maybe not. We have some findings that we wanted to share with you all about your readiness for strategic planning. And these are observations that we gathered from the participants who we spoke with, and in observations about readiness for the future. So our first observation is centered around understanding roles and responsibilities, understanding the commission and management roles and responsibilities. And there needs to be some clearer definition and adherence to policy legislative frameworks. This finding came from, there was reported from participants that there was insufficient understanding of roles and responsibilities between commission and management. There have been delays in decision-making, micromanagement of operational functions. Existing policies and legislative frameworks may be out of date. You might want to consider updating some of those policies, creating legislative frameworks to help you work in a consensus and collaborative way. We always want to make sure that any kind of frameworks or out of date leads to non-compliance of legal and ethical standards. So consider updating some of those frameworks. Because without clear policy and adherence to roles and responsibilities, it's difficult to know who to hold responsible, who to hold accountable when there's a need for action and decision-making and compliance with legislative mandates. The next finding was about boundaries. And so communication between the commission and management is somewhat fractured and needs to consider some proper boundaries. We found that there is some fragmented and inconsistent information flow that leads to cohesive decision-making. It hampers your ability to move a topic on. There are some inefficiencies about communication delineations between commissioners and management, blurred boundaries, and I can't stress that word enough. It creates confusion about authority and responsibilities and roles, and it increases the risks of the commission overstepping each other as well as overstepping management's operational oversight. The lack of clear and structured communication impacts the organizational efficiency, delaying those decisions, key decisions that need to be made, and that leads to the operations not knowing where they're supposed to go, where they're supposed to turn to. It leads to dysfunction. The third observation is trust. It's such an important piece about and between commissioners, that lack of trust between commissioners and between city management. It's created an environment of discord. There has been reports of the reduction of the board's ability to collaboratively and effectively make timely and unified decisions. Truly, creates a wedge in between. The lack of trust between commission and management means that that mutual respect, that second guessing, is a challenge. To question others' motives and intentions is part of a concern for hindering alignment of strategic goals. And as you go into strategic planning, it's important that the trust is there between commissioners, the trust is there between commissioners and management, so that you can continue to align around those strategic priorities and those goals. the perceived distrust between commissioners and between commission and management, it just weakens the confidence of the community in you, in the city employees, city stakeholders, impacting morale and affecting the city's reputation and performance. And the final observation that we heard reported that we saw is that the organization lacks a clear strategic focus, and it results in everything is a priority, so nothing's a priority, and that's a challenging environment to be in. The absence of a strategic plan and focused priorities leads to confusion. What are we focused on? It overextends resources. It doubles and triples the cost sometimes to see management go back and forth, or the commission go back and forth on a decision, and reduces your effectiveness. Just plain out reduces your ability to have a positive impact year over year. Decision making is inconsistent and preventing the city from advancing forward. In strategic planning, advancing your goals forward and achieving. You decide on what you want to achieve with setting your priorities, but if you can't achieve that, then again, it might be another plan that sits on the shelf or doesn't get approved. And that's problematic because you work hard to study issues, to adopt policy, to adopt ordinance, to adopt plans. Carrying them out is critical for service delivery to your community. And treating all issues as equally urgent, it can result in delays. That's that everything is a priority, so nothing is a priority. And there isn't any mechanism to prioritize that. So that's that structured framework or boundaries that you can set, those frameworks for decision making, those frameworks for what issues come before the commission. Those are important for you to establish how you are going to deal with topics and subjects and how you're going to communicate about them. So we prepared, as part of our engagement with the city, we prepared a readiness memo, and that is, I've briefly gone over some of those findings that are in that, but it is a memo that addresses the readiness of the Traverse City community for the strategic planning process. And so what we have put together is some guidance about proceeding with strategic planning and the process and the risks associated, that we recommend that you proceed with caution on the strategic planning process until stability, trust, effective communication can be established, so that the commission works as one policy-making body, and the commission and management collaboration is improved. We wanted to bring to your attention the risks associated with strategic planning when the organization isn't ready, and that means that there could be lack of cohesion and failure to reflect your true priorities in the strategic plan. Implementation and key deliverables may never come to fruition, may be delayed, or just fail altogether. Lack of buy-in can cause potential goal derailment, so it is important to understand that buy-in and consensus in the strategic plan that you can all get around, and once you're ready to adopt a strategic plan. Lack of trust and communication would continue to foster commission conflicts, and ultimately strategic planning, in the absence of readiness, trust, and strong communication, can lead to a failed plan and missed opportunity and long-term organizational decline. We do have some recommendations, though, for the city. Something for you to consider is that team building retreat. This would help you to, one, develop and improve relationships, improve trust, build key elements in this effort would mean that you might, learn to understand the dynamics and leadership styles of you individually, collaborate about effective and professional mannerisms that you would want to uphold for yourself and for the commission as a whole. Establish clear and unified goals as an elected body and create a sense of stability for the community. The other recommendation that we have is to update rules of city commission. This is a document that you have. We've reviewed it. And the reason that we recommend updating it is that this is a place where you can set those frameworks. There was multiple communities that I've worked with, but updating your rules and specifically setting sections about communication, how you communicate, with each other, how you communicate in public. Social media is used so frequently now as the way to promote the city's work. But often cases that we found is that social media is something that anyone can establish a page. I mean, unless it comes specifically from the city, that may not be accurate information that comes out. So you set those social media policies in that communication, in that rules of city commission. And in the community where it seemed a lot, it was debated well in the city in Washington, Snohomish, Washington. Once it was adopted, it was something that not only did it set the stage, it set the framework, but it also had mechanisms in there for the council to police themselves, to hold each other accountable, but to hold themselves as a group accountable about how they were going to communicate. And that's a big one. It builds trust, it builds mutual respect, is if you adhere to that, council rules. And oftentimes it's based on Robert's Rules of Order. So some key takeaways that we wanted to leave you with are those clear understanding of commissioner roles and responsibilities, the importance of collaboration and communication, and the legal and ethical duties of the commission. We encourage you to seek out strategies for effective teamwork and decision-making, and that we also encourage you from a strategic planning standpoint is to establish a vision, set your strategic priorities, build that consensus, and set that vision for the community, because we believe that the value of ongoing governance, learning, and continuous improvement is key to your effectiveness and achieving your vision for the future. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions of the commission.
Will commissioners go first? Go ahead, Tim.
Any comments, because this was prepared several months ago, I'm sure you've updated it, but we're well along in the strategic planning process. So any specific comments to that, like anything you'd like to add, given how far along that process already is?
Well, readiness can happen at any time, or understanding if you're ready. We had intended to certainly provide you with this readiness assessment before the strategic plan, and so we knew that we wanted to, recommend that you proceed with caution. So the timing of this assessment, unfortunately, had to come a little bit later. But that still means, and whether it's a reminder about collaboration and cohesiveness and governance roles and responsibilities, it still may help you set the stage for a successful outcome. I talked about strategic plan is an important roadmap and vision. The implementation plan is equally important, if not harder, because now it means that you have to connect resources to carrying out that vision. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to offer just a couple of thoughts there. Yeah, we know that you're pretty far into your process at this point. I think the important reminder is as you get to a place where you're going to look at a draft plan and you're going to consider what's in there, that you can work to achieve a consensus position on that plan. The best you want when you're looking at adopting a strategic plan is you would like to have a unanimous yes vote on the plan. That's number one. Then number two is having the will to hold to the North Star direction of your strategic plan as you move into implementation. And then there are obviously things that happen in the environment that you cannot and will not be able to anticipate. But if your plan is well constructed, that plan should be able to serve as your North Star during those times of disruption or unanticipated events, and should serve as guidance for you when new ideas come forward or possibilities or possible opportunities. They should be considered in the context of your strategic plan. Does this fit with our strategic direction? Should we do that? Is it in alignment with where we said together we wanted to go? And so I think some of the points that we identified when we were interviewing everybody in the early fall, some of those things still apply as you move into the different phases of the completion of your strategic plan and then its implementation.
If I can chime in as the chair/coordinator here, I think it's a very fair question. I think we've had, so far from what I've heard during our meetings, positive feedback from those of us who have participated in the process. So I think that actually helps. Before we were going blind, not knowing what to expect. Now everybody kind of has some experience with it tangentially of how that's been collected and how it's been done. And I would say that very noted, that suggestion of us having a retreat, and so that can always be done too as we're finishing before implementation to get us on pages too. So I just to add that 2 cents to your question, Tim. Other questions? Go ahead, Jack.
I'm interested in the interaction when talking about conflict. You know, this is a small group, and so small group dynamics apply. But you talked about conflict prevention and conflict resolution, and then those all seem to lead into this idea of building a consensus and hopefully a unanimous consensus about strategic direction and priorities. And here we are today, and we're missing 2 of our 7, and we've struggled for months now to get everyone in the same room, much less on the same page. Are there any extra ideas you would like to offer to us?
Well, with regards to if it's conflict resolution, or if it's, I want to speak, if your question is about ideas for, those who aren't in the room or who aren't, is that your question?
I think so, but
Okay.
also more globally
Yeah.
about just generally, how do we work effectively to resolve or prevent conflict escalation?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know as if you can ever, you can 100% prevent conflict. So you have to then focus on how do you deal with conflict resolution. And so that is, there's ways to do that. Is your commission rules of procedure is that you lay out how you are going to deal with a conflict, and you identify how you bring up an issue, amongst members. You then identify the way in which you have that dialogue. And so there's another community that I worked with, is that when there was a conflict, that it would be brought up, that everyone got to kind of speak their mind, and then had a dialogue about where did they find some commonality, some common ground, that the parts where they could agree on, and then they focused on what they could agree on, and then, you know, we're able to solve, you know, decisions, make decisions, solve those conflicts. But you identify how you're going to deal with the conflict in a way that's structured, that's creating that framework, that's setting those boundaries in how you're going to do that. That team building retreat or workshop or whatever you might call it, there might be a specific part where you are going to hash out some conflicts that have bubbled up, that stay with the group, that you just can't get resolve on. But that's where your facilitator would maybe work on that focused issue to have that dialogue, and then ultimately you're going to agree on a resolve for it. And then that's where that commissioner rules of procedure then would step in to say that once you agree on something, then you're all going to support it, whether or not you liked the decision or not. You may like a part of the decision, but nonetheless, if it's all agreed in a consensus building manner, then it needs to be supported by the group with one voice and one common communication. Michelle, do you have anything else on conflict?
Yeah, and I would just tie it to part of your question that asked about what that means for your strategic plan. I think it's a good thing to be able to remind yourselves and remind each other that it's not necessary to support every single thing in the plan. What is important is that you can agree on those strategic pillars, those main areas of focus that you want for your community and that your community wants for your community. And that you might not, as individuals, you might not support every single initiative or objective that becomes part of those pillars. But if you can support 85% of it, then you should be able to vote yes. And so I think it is really honing in on those areas of alignment and agreement and really finding ways to make sure that each person on the commission is able to see the things that they care about somewhere in the plan. And just as, you know, a ray of sunshine, I've been facilitating strategic planning processes for local governments for 28 years all over the country. And there's only been twice in that time that there has not been a unanimous vote on the final plan. So, you know, I think you'll find more to agree on than disagree on when it comes to your strategic plan.
Good word. Other questions right now? I have a couple. I just didn't want to jump the gun. I just had, well, first of all, I want to take this opportunity. We've all been talking about, kind of related to this, the ethics committee that we formed. And I just wanted to update everybody. We're waiting just on Mary Grover's schedule so we can make sure that our experts in the room with us. So that is part of what's continuing, as well as taking into account these suggestions here for other assessments. I had a question, and I'm casting my memory because I kind of remember this coming up during the interview, of the social media policy. Just to clarify again, because I think sometimes our roles up here versus us as citizens with opinions and First Amendment rights, et cetera, can sometimes be, when we talk about things in kind of more absolutes or statements, can be misinterpreted. So the social media policy, would that be in general, or is that something that would be, when you've done it with other groups, is that more when we're talking about or dealing with city business or, you know, business related to our roles specifically? Is that what that policy would be looking at?
It would be. And
Okay.
so that, it was included, it was there's a special section in there, the elected, the commission member, how they deal with social media on city business. You know, when, for example, if they're talking about something, an action of the board, it's we decided because there was a vote taken, and if the motion passed, then, you know, it becomes a thing and you do something with it, right? You approve it, you vote it down, or you move it on to committee.
Mm-hmm.
So you speak in terms of ours and we, and only, you know, the rules surrounding social media as it pertains to you as a commission member.
And then I had another question of roles. Right now, our training for any newly elected, whatever role it is up here, is about a half day where we go over everything from kind of how the budget's presented to, how rough Robert's Rules of Order. And so in your experience with both of you, I would ask, in your experience with this kind of outreach and work with different governments, do you have, and it doesn't even have to be totally shared here, but as part of this or something we would follow up on, kind of some suggestions of places that have had really good trainings, you think, or highlights from that should be maybe emphasized in trainings that we might not be doing or we might need to expand to include? Because I think sometimes where you start from, obviously, is where you're starting from. And so how do we start at a good spot and build on that versus maybe starting at not the best spot of explaining rules and then trying to correct in the future?
Well, we can share that in another framework. It really kind of depends on, and especially when it comes to onboarding, newly elected folks. Sometimes it takes not just a half a day. It may take a day, and maybe another day, kind of coming up with, maybe they're hearing presentations from departments. Maybe they're really getting immersed into Robert's rules and council policies. And so when the commission has a set of very robust commissioner rules, then that might be an immersion into, here's how we as an elected group decided to structure ourselves, decided to run our city based on this set of rules. So that might take some more time aside from learning state law and learning all of the fire hose of things, pieces of things that you need to learn when you become an elected official. And so in my work with councils, it takes more than a day. But it's kind of like an onboarding program that city management puts on for new employees. But there may be some positives that would come out of an onboarding of an elected, and we can share more into the details or into the weeds about what that might look like.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Jackie.
I think,
go ahead.
to add on to that, I think what's really important is it has to go beyond onboarding as well. So I'll give you a specific example. There is a city that we work with in the state of Colorado where we developed their strategic plan. And for 5 years in a row, we have facilitated a retreat, and it ends up being on a Saturday, about a retreat with the city council to not only update their strategic plan, but within that retreat, we do team development of the council. We do team development with the council and senior management in the organization, and they revisit their council policies and protocols every year to review them, to remind themselves of what they are, but also sometimes to make revisions. We didn't do a revision this year, but 2 years back we did, because new things crop up, right? And new dynamics happen. So the idea is that you would revisit it, not just when you're onboarding a new commission member, but on some regular cadence as an elected body as a whole.
Okay, interesting, thank you. Jackie, go ahead, and then Mitch.
I'm really supportive of the idea of a review of our commission rules and policies. And I've been doing some reading about Robert's Rules of Order and whether for smaller organizations, smaller communities like ours, whether they become more of an impediment to communication than a way to facilitate smooth communication. And I wondered, have you run into any of that? Are there alternatives that you think could possibly add value?
That's a great question. Robert's Rules of Order, while there's a lot if you've taken a deeper dive into them, they assist with, having a good conversation. And even though it might seem silly to some, because I mean, I've had council members who have called some pretty significant names, and they're not going to abide by them. But yet, for those that stick to the process, stick to the motion and the second and the discussion and making sure everyone has a voice, and then before anyone else gets taking turns, so it's kind of like kindergarten, but playing nice in the sandbox. But it makes for then effective communication and effective decision making, and at a regular elected, at elected boards, it's important that that's the business meeting, right? You have learned about this topic, you have gone through the protocols that have been put in place for you to understand the issue, and when it comes time to vote, then that is very, very formal, so that you are not going backwards, and that's that staff not knowing what's going to happen, when it comes down to, it's time for the commission to, take their vote because they have assessed the issue and now it is time to make a decision. That's where this structure comes into play, this very focused dialogue on the topic, very structured. The mayor as the presider has that control, keeps that decorum, keeps that conversation, notes everyone's part of it, and then the roll is called, the vote is taken. So it leads to effective communication. There are communities that adopt it in full, they address it in full. There might be some tweaks, and that's in that having that conversation about, we don't want to, be so formal on protocol and Robert's Rules of Order, but we want to do X, Y, and Z. But knowing that, where are you deviating from Robert's Rules of Order? That has to be decided. That's your framework, that's your guide rails, your bumpers. If you're going to bowl, you've got to have those guide rails in place.
Thank you.
Mitch?
Yes, and I'd like to speak about in specific training and familiarization with the boardsmanship and the functions of local government. The Michigan Municipal League is a great resource for my fellow colleagues and for anyone in local government. Not only do they have very easy to read explainers on anything from the Open Meetings Act to municipal finance, but they also have the Elected Officials Academy program, which allows you to learn more about the role and about what opportunities may be available that we just haven't realized yet, and in part because we are not the only city in northern Michigan, but we're the largest, and northern Michigan compared to, say, southern Michigan, comparable municipalities are few and far between. So we can't just, like in Oakland County, throw a rock and hit 3 other cities to talk with them about how things are going over there.
That's a very good point. MML is a very good partner of ours. I think what I would bring us back to, though, from this conversation is that this is about us communicating to and creating space, both as this body itself, but future bodies being able to kind of have those retreat moments or other ways to get in touch with each other, to understand each other, and then, as you're pointing out, clear rules so that the public watching knows how we're working through our meetings, as well as each other. So, somebody's not just making a motion out of nowhere or not having questions, something nobody's having an opportunity to talk or something. So I do agree that they have some really great materials, and if anybody's thinking of running, a great place to start. But also bringing it back to kind of the points here is some of the work that we have to do as this current commission, and maybe improving our own trainings and preparation as a body or as an organization. Do we have other questions right now? Go ahead, Heather.
What is the the current schedule of strategic planning, of the process right now? Like, what happens next and when?
We exiled staff over there so we could have our conversation, but Liz, if you even want to take the, oh, you've got the portable mic, never mind, we're good.
Yeah, so the next steps, I believe David Burrell mentioned them at our last meeting, and I can follow up with you as well. There will be a second community survey to refine the results of the first round of data that we collected. The first community survey, we received, I think, over 1,100 responses. It was a combination of open-ended questions that are all being manually tallied to get those major themes plugged out. We had meetings going over our 6 pillars that have been developed, and those will be further refined within that second community survey. And then I'm not sure if there are going to be any more community meetings, but a draft plan will be issued for us to look at in the spring, mid-April, and then there will be an opportunity for discussion at the board level, refine the draft, approve the draft, and then celebrate with the community. That's not exactly verbatim what's going to happen, but I can get you more information on those coming next steps as we go into March, April, and May.
And that, I was going to say that community part, sorry, when I was there on that Thursday night, they said that would probably, they were aiming for like mid-May on that, was that correct? There's a head nod over there.
So everything is supposed to be wrapped up before November?
Yes. Go ahead, Jackie.
I think maybe an important part of the question about timing is whether we have insights from the strategic plan that will help us in prioritizing budgets for 25, 26.
And Liz has got her hand up over there.
Yeah, I can speak to that, and I'd actually be really interested in Jen and Michelle's perspectives. When our facilitator, David Burrell, was here with Future IQ, he did touch on that. And as we build on the data and test the data and get more individuals filling out our surveys and attending focus groups, there shouldn't really be any surprises as we move through the process and get to the end. We've developed those 6 pillars. We're refining those pillars. Then we're going to work on action items to achieve those results. But that doesn't mean that we can't work now, even though we don't have that final document, because again, every step is building upon the past. The data is building on the data, and it's being tested and validated. And so there's no need to not consider some of those pillars and some of those ideas and thoughts while we're working on this budget, knowing that that final budget or the final product will be ready in May. We approved the final agenda in June, but I think there might be an opportunity to have a draft strategic plan correlation with our May study session if the stars align, which would be really lovely. But I wasn't sure how you discuss with your other clients, Jen or Michelle, on how to start implementing the broader themes that are being developed prior to the plan being approved.
Thanks, Liz. Michelle, do you want to start, or you want me to start?
I was unable to hear what Liz said.
Oh.
This is about the strategic plan is not adopted before they start the budget process.
Go ahead, you start, Jen, and I'll add if I feel like I need to.
Okay. Well, it's sometimes common where the strategic planning process doesn't align up with the budget season, budget development. But what city manager was indicating is that when there's an initial draft, you likely know those pillars are not going to likely change unless there is some, earth-shattering issue that happens. So you can start to align your budget discussions centered around those pillars, around those priorities or goals that have developed as part of those conversations, and with your process, identifying actions towards achieving the goals. Because again, what are you trying to achieve with this priority or this goal? Then that can help you with establishing your budget allocations. It might be easy enough that you can align your budget dollars in that kind of interim time, but it is not uncommon. The other thing that I would add is that once a strategic plan is adopted, it's a multi-year visionary plan, and you do budget amendments, or, you know, you, maybe there is some unknown where you have to amend the budget for some reason, that might be a good milestone for you to then go back and true up, you know, your budget in that particular fiscal period and add something in or revise something. So that could be a possibility. So an approved strategic plan doesn't have to be before a budget is established. Michelle, did you have anything to add to that?
I think you said it perfectly, Jen.
Okay, Tim. Well, actually, I had a really quick follow-up on this, sorry. Liz, just while you're over there and you've got your mic, you know, you guys have all been, you and staff and us obviously, have all participated in the process as we've gone along. Has that been factoring in? I know we don't have the final results, but as those conversations have been going on and as you all are, because everybody, the veterans know this, but the staff's already working on the budget right now. This doesn't just magically appear in May. They're already going through a lot of requests and everything. Is that already kind of front of mind to the best of your ability?
Yeah, I mean, we've only had our first few budget meetings, so we're only tipping, you know, getting into there. But yeah, no, it is front of mind. The pillars are there. The staff have been participating from the beginning. And of course, many of them are city residents who filled out the city survey. So I've encouraged the staff, if there's something in their budget that they say, hey, this may align with a future strategic planning, you know, initiative, or this might, we're talking about that. I haven't specifically drawn out certain things that are being budgeted in the line, but as I work with our finance team, I could have them highlight different pillars that are being developed and where those budgeting items might fit within those pillars, so that as we get there, that work has already been done. Maybe we can make notes in BSNA to keep tabs, so to speak, on those efforts.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Tim, for letting me step on you a little there for the piggyback, but go ahead.
To the extent possible, I've participated in the meetings for the strategic plan, and it's gone well, and I've provided feedback. But both in your presentation and in your comments, you continue to indicate that when we adopt the strategic plan, or you know, when we will, like we might adopt a strategic plan, but just for the public's, you know, knowledge and interest, it's not a given, because we did not see like a process ahead of time and say, oh yeah, we like that process, let's go with that. Like, this is the process and that's fine, but there's risk to the process. And I've shared this with folks in the public that have asked me about it, because it gets to framing. Like, you do an information gathering, they synthesize it, they put it out there for a second round, and it's, do you like A or B? And if you go with B instead of A, then it takes you this way. And then you frame the conversation somewhat there, and then you go through another step and, you know, iteration. And there is a risk that it could go sideways. We could end up over here with, well, how did that happen? Unlikely. It seems to be going well so far, but I just don't want to put it out there to the public that 100% this will be adopted no matter what comes out of it. Like, it does need a final, and that's our responsibility to look at and say, does this really make sense from our knowledge of the community and what's going on? So just, I'm hopeful still, but I want to make sure the public's not thinking this is 100% no matter what.
I would agree, but I would also say, it reminds me, you putting it that way reminded me of the charrette we did for 8th Street, and did we get the absolute perfect in everyone's vision? No, but we got a pretty good, better looking 8th Street than what we had there before. So it is always a process to see where it does go, though. Do we have more questions or anything else you want to share? A long process ahead. So I guess based on our questions and kind of where we're at, did you have anything else you wanted to add, though, now that we've had a little conversation?
We don't have anything more to add. We definitely wish success. It sounds like the process is going well. That's good to hear. And, you know, we encourage you to, you know, consider some of the recommendations for, you know, retreats and commission rules to, you know, to help set a framework and set a path forward for.
Great, thank you. And we'll be talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be talking about how to move some of that forward for the body too. Obviously, we need to bring it forward to make the decisions on it. So we'll be looking into that and bringing that forward in the very, very near future, and probably looking at some maybe even retreat availability as we're getting into this final process of the strategic planning. So thank you all. still very good information for us to have. We really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
Good luck to you.
Yep, good luck.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, I'll let Jen kind of pack up and let the tech go down. We did have public comment on the road salt, so I will open it up for any public comment on the board governance training before our general public comment, which is right after.
Fred Bimber, 1223 Randolph Street, city resident. I'd like to ask a few questions here, if I could, of Jen Ferguson. It's my understanding that the report...
Well, can you address them to the body, and then we can have her
Oh,
come up as
okay.
follow-up, yeah.
Well, I'd like to get a couple responses as we go along. My understanding is that the report that was delivered here today was derived after interviews of city commission members, the city manager, and other members of city staff. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Can the report that was just given, and it need be no more than the PowerPoint slides, be produced and made publicly available?
Yeah, it's been a public meeting, so we can definitely do that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That will suffice for now.
Thank you, Fred. Yep. Any other public comment on that? Hold on. Go ahead. If you have public comment, please make it on this item, and then we'll have general public comment at the end.
Doug Kimball, Spruce Street, Traverse City. And can I ask a question and get a response?
Hopefully.
Okay. So it's about the, in a governance session, the Open Meetings Act. If there's a violation, who do you bring that to, and what's the procedure to correct it?
Is that the last question that you have? Like, I just, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll treat that as the end of the public comment. That the OMA is brought to, you can bring it to the chief of police, but that's where it's been investigated in the past, so brought there. So I think Lauren can assist as well in direction if there's any kind of gray areas. So, all right, just one second. Any other public comment? Yep. Okay. Closing a public comment, go to Jackie.
And this is really a follow-up on Mr. Bimber's request. Jen had mentioned that there will be a readiness memo coming from Barry Dunn to Traverse City, and I just wondered if that also becomes part of, the public.
Yeah, anything that's
record.
not attorney-client privilege is public, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that gets into, yeah, I think people sometimes think just it's not a packet, it's not public. Anything can be requested. Most of us, I think, unless it's attorney-client privilege, if it's reached out, we try to put it on the website, or minimally, if somebody reaches out to us about something that might only be on one person's radar, we are absolutely free to forward anything that's public to the public. Everything eventually can be done by FOIA, which helps with big requests, but for a one-on, one-off, we're always welcome to just go ahead and do that. So, any other questions before we close this out? Okay. We'll move on now to final general public comment. So anything under the sun on this sunny night.
Hi, good evening. Clint Schlegel, 929 Alouez Trail, city resident, not a business owner. I wanted to take this moment to address what I feel are some misrepresentations in the Hubble-Roth-Clark report on the West Front Street Improvement Project. Within that report, the contractor identified 9 crashes that occurred over a 5-year period that they say pertain to their issue and supported their recommended actions. The report would lead you to believe that all 9 of those accidents pertain to that particular roadway and the design of it, specifically to the curve in the eastbound direction. I would argue that there are really only 3 accidents in that report that directly relate to the design of that roadway, and only 1 of those relating to the eastbound traffic. Of those 6 that really don't relate, 2 of those were actually deer strikes, which could happen anywhere. 1 was a rear-end accident westbound, which I don't know how that happens after a stop sign. 2 were DUI accidents. Again, they probably couldn't navigate a straight roadway, let alone a crooked roadway. And 1 struck a speed sign that was actually past the curve westbound. So of the 3 remaining that I think actually relate to the curve of the roadway, 2 of those were westbound traffic. 1 hit a curb, never actually departed the roadway. And another one actually did depart the roadway and hit a utility pole, but neither one of those caused any private property damage. The single incident that seems to be the focus of the improvements on the particular roadway, again, was the result of an 18-year-old inexperienced driver that was under the influence of drugs. And that's what we seem to be basing our recommendations on, of how we want to make improvements to that particular area. My intent is not to understate the potential tragedy that would have occurred there had that person actually killed someone in the backyard that it ran into. But my point I want to make is it really the city's responsibility to protect a single residence from an inexperienced teenage driver under the influence of drugs by installing and constructing a roadside barrier based on this single data point. This, in my opinion, could create a cascading precedent that other citizens were going to come to the commission, and if they have a car that damages part of their personal property, that they're going to ask the commission to install a roadside barrier. And what I don't want is a city full of roadside barriers. What I would suggest to the commission is, can we set up a tiered approach to improvements based on the report that they provided? Specifically, there are some relatively cheap roadside sign improvements. Some currently aren't in accordance with standard practices. We can add additional signage identifying that curve in that road, especially in the eastbound lane, and then take a pause, maybe take a year or two, and assess the impact of those sign changes, which is relatively cheap and affordable, before we decide to spend another $65,000 on roadside barriers or $8,000 on painted roads, which we know is not going to last more than a single winter here in Traverse City. So again, my intent is to ask the commission to please take a tiered approach to this improvement area, and maybe start out with some of the more relatively cheaper areas of improvements. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any other general public comment for this evening?
Hi, Richard Robbins, 720 Center Place, back from extended vacation. Lots have happened since then. One of the things that happened was the very topic that was discussed today, and I'm in full support of his recommendation, as well as kind of rethinking this whole risk-based analysis around these types of issues, these types of situations. I was unaware of that type of analysis. I would encourage the city staff, the legal, as well as the city commission, to follow up on that detail. And if in fact that detail is correct, that's a very telling approach, or very telling information in order for us to kind of rethink that whole idea. I had originally on social media had expressed my opinion that if we are going to put a barrier in there, we have got to think about something more than an industrial barrier. This is an entry point to this city. We need the idea of possibly moving from Cedar Road forward to 25 miles an hour. I know it would have to be in collaboration with Garfield Township, but let's think innovatively out of the box if we do have to come up with a barrier. But this information, I think, is extremely important and very enlightening, and I'm so glad we have citizenry that is taking the initiative. So thank you very much for your time, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Take care.
Thank you so much for your time. Any other public comment? Okay, I'm going to bring it back, and just because it did get brought up in both those public comments, we did vote on that last week. We did vote for the guardrail. There was conversations about how to make it not just a green, ugly guardrail. There was money allocated instead of to just taking the pots out and putting in some grass, the Arts Commission to look at putting something nicer there as a welcome into the city. So there were some other things there. If you want to check that meeting, we also had a lot of robust conversation with our city attorney about liability, both as the city and as decision makers. So just wanted to not let you all think that we're ignoring it. There was action taken last week, and we could all be happy to answer questions with you afterwards, and also the meeting if you wanted to see more of the detailed dialogue. With that, any final comments from commissioners? Seeing none. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being part of tonight's discussion, and we will see you next week for a regular meeting and St. Patrick's Day. Oh.